started at Nash having conversations about success and what success with regard to foundational skills, yes, but success holistically. We actually got into the weeds talking about how do we define success for individual students. Does success for one student look the same as it does for another student? Do all students come to Nash Community College for the same reason? Do they want the same outcomes? And really, we kind of pumped the brakes at that point and said, look, let's do this. Let's talk about a little less about why the students are here and more about why we're here. And so it kind of sounds, I know the first time I said it out loud, it kind of said, well, wait a second, you can't have one without the other. But we go back to those conversations about what success looks like. And really, if we boiled it down to one student in one class at one time, that student is here whether they're taking an English class or a welding class. They're here to get a little bit better at whatever it is that they're doing. So they enroll in the class. And so we took on this belief that all the students were here when they enrolled in a class. Their goal was to get to the end of the class and make a passing grade. And that's where we kind of started our conversation about success, what that looks like in the classroom. So a student enrolls, great. We get, like a lot of institutions of higher education, we get paid based on tuition and based on enrollment. And so having the students enroll in class was a great place to start. But again, talking about beginning with the end in mind, for us, success for students we landed on was them getting to the end of the class and having a grade of C or better so they could get to that next level. And then we started talking about, okay, if the student makes it through that first class with a C or better, and look, I've got an interesting story about a student who made it to the end of his first class for the first time ever and didn't make a C or better, but was so engaged in the class that he was excited about re-registering for the class in the spring semester, and that started a whole other conversation. But I'll maybe touch on that a little bit later on. But then we started to talk about if I have a student in my class and I'm going to pass them off to somebody else in their class, whether we're in the same subject or in a different subject area, that becomes a kind of a common idea about success across the campus. And then we talked about, well, when our students leave us, ultimately we want them to graduate, so that's the campus success. But if they go to a four-year school or they go into the workforce, so if they're transferring or if they're going into a career, what are we doing to make sure that we're looking at helping them be successful regardless of where they go or where they start, but once we've had them. And so here's the first poll we're talking about is, for us, we had a lot of conversation about what are foundational skills. And of course, this was a few years ago. And did I get that right?
Yep, that's great.
Okay, great. Sorry, guys.
The poll's up, Trent.
Perfect, thank you. And of course, as you can see by the choices there, what are foundational skills? We had a lot of conversation about these students being ready for college, right? Like, can they even read? Can they write? Can they do basic math? And again, we kind of flipped that around a little bit and said, well, let's start talking less about our students prepared for us and making sure that we are prepared for them. And so let's just take a quick second to knock this around a little bit. What are foundational skills? And just go ahead and choose your best answer there.
And we'll give it just a couple of seconds here to get everybody to respond. We've got most of the audience coming in at this point, Trent, but a couple more out there to still come in. All right. Yeah. So there you go. It looks like about 3/4 say all of the above and more, and 1/4 saying all of the above.
Right. So that makes perfect sense. And I mean, that really kind of mirrors the conversation that we had on our campus, that yes, students need to come to us and have a basic level of reading and writing skills and have basic math skills. But you know what the bottom line is? Sometimes they don't, which means in higher ed in North Carolina, for years we had students kind of just churning in developmental education, not really making the progress they needed to have, not really getting it, and therefore never really moving forward. And we could easily look at that and say, yeah, that's not being successful by anybody's measure. And so when we said, yeah, we started off and saying, yeah, all of the above, absolutely. Those things are critical to a student. We can't get them to the next level if they can't do those basic things. But then we started having some other conversations about, well, what else makes up those solid foundational skills? And that got us having conversation about communication. Yes, reading and writing, but students need to be able to articulate what they read and write. Critical thinking, we need to be able to pose questions to students and have them be able to think through answers on their own, which started us moving away from just telling the students the information and having them dig into the information themselves. Problem solving and collaboration often go hand in hand, and really what we started to hear was from our industry partners as well, that, hey, I've hired a welder, and this student graduated from Nash Community College, and they know how to weld, but wow, they're not really good when I turn them loose on a project on their own. Their problem-solving skills or their level of inquisitiveness or self-starting, they seem to be lacking there. And we started to get that feedback a few years ago and really went to work on it. Part of our SACS, our Southern Association of Colleges and Schools Commission on College reaccreditation a number of years ago, one of the things that bubbled up from that process was that our general education core of classes, we weren't really measuring what we were doing there, and so what started there, and this was included in the white paper, was we formed a general education student learning outcomes team, which focused on some of these areas: communication, critical thinking, problem solving, and we embedded those things into a handful of gen ed classes. The problem was that even though we were doing our best to measure those things, we weren't being intentional about teaching those things. And so there was a little bit of a gap. And when I say a little bit of a gap, I really mean a large gap, because we were still in the lecture, the telling kind of frame of teaching, not really the teaching frame or the pedagogical frame of teaching. And so we started having some conversations at a classroom, really a micro level. We started with a poll of the faculty. In fact, I asked the faculty at a meeting one time, what could I do to help you be more successful with students? And the response was, this would have been another good poll question, right? But the response at the time was, if you could get them to come to class more often, and if you could get them to do the work. And I'm like, okay, well, let's really dig down on that. Students, at about the same time, the National Center for Educational Statistics released some data that talked about why students stop coming to class, right, or don't attend. And the bulk of the reasons, I guess 2/3 of the rationale, is because, first of all, they didn't think anybody would care if they stopped coming. And the second part was that they weren't engaged, or they didn't see the value in coming. And so we really started having a conversation about the content piece versus the process piece, where we really examined this conversation about pedagogy, about teaching and learning versus covering material, right? We'd have really honest conversation with some of our faculty. I remember one specific conversation with a biology instructor who talked about there's just so much material to cover in anatomy and physiology that we just spend so much time covering material. And so that popped up a real interesting question, right? And that is that, if learning isn't happening, is teaching actually happening? So, we started, again, having those conversations about, if you cover 100 pages of text or 90 minutes of lecture and students learn 10% of it, have you really done what you wanted to do? And so we had this real conversation about content versus process, and then we added the context piece of it, which really started us moving towards the instructional strategies part, where we said, okay, let's start having students do the work in front of us. Well, what did that mean exactly? Well, that meant that we needed to really dig in on the pedagogy, really look at engaging instructional strategies, really help students understand that if they didn't attend class, they were going to miss out on something. Not just a set of PowerPoint slides that someone could send them, or a set of notes that they could share with somebody. And trust me, when I went to college, that's what we did, right? We attend one out of every 3 or 4 classes and exchange notes, and it wasn't the right way to go to school, but we know how students can operate if you give them a chance. But what we did was we created learning environments on campus that engaged students, where they knew from the minute they walked into class that they were going to be busy doing the coursework, doing the class work. And so then we kind of discovered another gap, right? How do we create classroom environments that are full of engaging instructional strategies when the bulk of our faculty are content experts, not pedagogical experts? And so we partnered with Avid for higher education. Avid's been around in K-12 in terms of college preparedness, helping high school students become prepared for college for 35 years, and about 6 or 7 years ago launched Avid for Higher Education. And that helped us put sort of the hand in the glove in terms of helping our faculty understand the kinds of things they can do in their classroom to engage students in the material. A big piece of this was for us to make this a campus-wide strategy. Typically, Avid, like a lot of professional development facilitators, will build a cohort model. We had a first-year experience class, our college campus success class, where you know, that would be an ideal place to put some of these strategies. But our president at the time said, well, look, if we're going to make this investment in our faculty, we're going to make the investment in the entire campus, which was critical for our overall success. And so we built a campus-wide strategy that was built on a campus-wide commitment to institute a common language and a common instructional framework, which included lesson planning, which included the language of instruction. So when students walk into a class and they hear, you know, make a name tent, they might, by the end of the semester, they've made 15 or 20 name tents, and they know exactly what to do, and they know how that name tent is going to help them engage and build relationships in the classroom. If they're asked to do a think, pair, share, or a 10-2-2 or a jigsaw activity, this is the language, the instructional language that's used across the campus, and it's built within an instructional framework so that students, we always say as well that college is difficult. College is supposed to be difficult. Let's not make the learning process difficult. Let's make the learning process as seamless as we can, so that as students come in, they can make that transition from maybe it's their job, maybe they've just dropped their kids off at school, maybe they've just, you know, dropped their mom off at the hospital, whatever. Our students are going through all sorts of life events. Let's make transitioning from life to college as seamless and as easy as we possibly can. So that was, again, a critical piece for us, is that we have all faculty on campus speaking the same instructional language and using a very common instructional framework as well. So students walk into class, they know that they're going to do a warm-up or an icebreaker activity. They know they're going to have some direct instruction. They know they're going to have some collaborative, interactive instruction. They know they're going to have some independent time, and then they know there's going to be some kind of assessment. And that happens in almost every class every day on the campus. And I know that's difficult to believe, but it's been a 6, almost 7-year journey to make that happen. And it's pretty impressive to have been part of that, to see how not only have our faculty embraced that, but students have embraced that as well. So what is it meant for students in the classroom? Well, obviously, and I'll show you, I've got a couple of slides a little bit later on that speak to the retention and graduation rates for the campus and overall enrollment in the face of declining enrollment across the state. Nash has been blessed by, even though new applications and new enrollment has been down, we've been able to retain students and graduate them at a significant level. We've also, you know, what I mentioned earlier about transfer success is students become better learners because they understand how they learn best, and then they understand how to mirror strategy. So even if they go to a four-year school and they're in a lecture theater with 200 or 300 peers, they still understand how to work with the peer next to them, even if their new instructor isn't necessarily pedagogical based. They become confident learners because they understand their own learning styles. They understand how to take better notes. They understand how to take better questions, ask better questions of themselves and of their peers. And look, we've gotten to a place where students are, where our president, as part of our campus commitment, has created study spaces all across campus, for a community college where most of our students are part-time. It's impressive to watch 4 or 5 students come out of a classroom and build their own study group because of the collaborative nature that they've experienced in the classroom. So they're confident about their learning, and then again they're successful in almost all situations. So if they go to a big 4-year school, or they go to a small 4-year school, or they're studying journalism, or they're studying biochemistry, they've learned how to become good learners, and that helps them be successful in multiple situations. When we talk about our industrial partners in Nash County, we've got a couple of partners, a large diesel engine manufacturer that employs well over 2,000 people. We've got a large pharmaceutical partner that again employs 2,000 people, they're expecting when our students transfer from us to them that again, that these students have learned some other skills along the way. And that's where we come back to this second definition of foundational skills. So we talk about them as employability skills. We talk about them as soft skills. Those are two very generic terms. You know, our student graduates are independent, responsive. They're able to work in teams. They're able to think critically, and they're able to problem solve on their own. And those are critical components, not only as they enter the workforce, but obviously as they want to grow through the workforce as well. So they may come in at an entry-level career spot, and within a short period of time, they understand how to navigate and move themselves forward. So that's all part of what we're trying to do, of course, on our campus. But there's obviously some barriers involved on any campus when anybody's trying to do anything new. And the Credo white paper talked about some barriers as well. So I thought I'd give you guys an opportunity to probably in all of the above would have worked here as well. But if you had to identify one barrier on your campus, what would it be in terms of time, the cost, too much content, too much technology, faculty skill level, student resistance, or maybe it's just not an institutional priority? We'll give you a couple of minutes, or a few seconds rather.
The votes are rolling in, Trent, so we'll give it a few more minutes here to see, or a few more seconds. I think we're good to go. Yes, so pretty funny there, real even split, about a quarter across the board.
Yeah, so perfect, right? I mean, because again, and it's really why I didn't include in all of the above. That would have made it, I think, a little easy, because I think anytime that an institution is going to make a commitment to improving anything, right? I mean, if you're going to improve your enrollment or your recruitment or whatever it's going to do, you have to prioritize where your barriers are so that you can kind of attack them. And look, the white paper spelled this out very clearly, and it was no different on our campus. When we would talk about an investment in professional development, where were we going to put that? Where do faculty have time to spend, 2 hours a week or 8 hours a quarter or whatever it happens to be on professional development? And then, of course, there's the cost. If we don't have any ready-made internal experts, where are we going to find the dollars to make that happen? Too much content, I mentioned that earlier. We had multiple faculty said, I just have too much content to cover. And then, of course, we add to that the technology, right? The advancements in technology mean that we're busy learning how to use an active board, let alone learning out how to integrate engaging instructional strategies while using an active board. And that goes to faculty skill level as well. Some folks are just really comfortable standing behind a podium and talking to or talking at students like they've done for 5 years or maybe 25 years or maybe longer. They're very comfortable with that, and that's where their skill level lies. And most people don't like to step outside their comfort zone. I mean, I think that's pretty straightforward. Student resistance. This was very real on our campus. We had groups, especially student groups that are cohorted together, like our nursing students. They're in class sometimes for 5 hours at a time, and we made a transition from 60 or 70 PowerPoint slides to 10 or 12 PowerPoint slides, a lot of active reading, a lot of report outs, a lot of collaborative activities. And some of the students said, wait a second, it feels like I'm paying to be here and I'm doing all the work. Shouldn't the faculty be doing all the work? And so these were very real conversations that we had with groups, some groups of students, especially some of them that were cohorted. Like, again, I use our nursing students as an example. It took more than one semester for us to help the students understand that them doing the work is an incredibly important part of the process and in terms of the learning process. And I go back to a slide that I talked about earlier when I asked the faculty how I could help them, and part of it was if you could just get them to do the work. Well, the answer to getting students to do the work is to have them do it in front of you, so that when they're struggling, when they're having problems, you can help them move through the problems. If you assign them some reading that they're supposed to do outside of class, we can't get real upset when they don't do the reading because they come back to us and say, well, I really didn't understand it, so I didn't do it, right? So we've created an environment where most of the work, there's still some homework, there's still some outside reading, there's still some flipped classroom activities, but most of the work takes place inside the classroom with the students, with each other, with the instructor. And again, not an institutional priority. I'll go back to the comment I made earlier. The commitment by our president, Dr. Carver, from day one was that this was going to, if we're going to make this investment, this is going to be an institutional priority. We're going to establish a common language. We're going to use the common language. And that's really what we've done, and that's been part and parcel to our success. And so you can't really look at one of these as being, you know, the barrier. There's obviously multiple barriers to implementing anything new on a campus, especially something as important as teaching and learning. And again, this is right from the white paper, right? While nearly 71% of campuses onboard students into value foundational skills, just 33% of campuses have required professional development for faculty supporting their understanding and instruction of foundational skills. So yes, we all know that it's important. How do we make that leap from recognizing its importance to making its importance a priority? And again, that comes down to helping faculty understand how to teach in a different way so that the skills become integrated in what they're doing. So again, we talked with our faculty about their level of content expertise, but not necessarily their instructional expertise. And so we just asked them several years ago, we just did a straw poll and said, you know, how many folks have had higher education teacher training? How many folks have got a degree in something that's education related? And of course, just like every other institute of higher ed, most of our folks, they have masters and PhDs in history or psychology or biology, or they have associate degrees or certifications in welding or computer integrated machining or culinary arts. Very few of our folks actually came from an educational background. And so we use this as an opportunity to say, well, let's dig in on this a little bit. We also just looked at the numbers, and on our campus, you know, and we have this conversation with other campuses as well who have made investments in computer software, for example. Well, we're going to invest in a retention software that will send early alert emails, and there's nothing wrong with that. But we looked at the amount of time that faculty and students spend together. So for even just a 3-hour-a-week basic, I'll use history as an example, a 3-hour history class, 16 weeks, that means that instructor and that student are spending 48 hours a semester together. There's almost no one in that student's life that gets them for 48 hours of what can be concentrated, intensive time together. And so we said, well, let's put the professional development in place so that we can maximize the student and faculty's time together, and also build around that the students' time that they have with other students as well. And then, like I mentioned earlier, we integrated whole campus professional development. Started off with a spring whole campus day, and then a fall whole campus day, and then a winter whole campus day. And our partners at Avid for Higher Education sent subject matter experts to help facilitate professional development 4 or 5 times a year. So now where we've evolved, we do monthly what we call peer academies now. And really where the Avid strategies really helped us jump into the engagement level was really active strategies focused on writing, inquiry and questioning, collaboration, organization and time management, and reading. You know, so these were active strategies that students and teachers could do together inside the classroom. So how do those things tie to foundational skills? Well, as I mentioned, you know, when we talk about writing, we're having students write in the class. It might be what we call a quick write, where if the instructor has been lecturing, doing some direct instruction for 10 or 15 minutes, that person will stop, ask the students to write down 2 or 3 points, and then you do some direct questioning and have students report out. So not only are they writing and reading and thinking, they're reporting out, they're learning to communicate as well. Inquiry, that's the critical thinking and problem solving. We use strategies such as think, pair, share, and 10-2-2, where again we stop with the direct instruction for a few minutes every 10 or 12 minutes, and we ask the students, we pose a question to the students, and we let them think about it. No talking, just think. Think about the question, think about the topic, turn to an elbow partner, have a quick conversation, and again, do a report out. And that spills into collaboration. You know, Paula Rutherford in one of her books talks about it's impossible to be alone when you're in a team, right? So when we talk about students working together collaboratively to solve problems, we had to make a real jump in higher ed from students working together. Well, that's just cheating. Well, our industry partners say we need students to be able to work in teams to solve problems. So let's work that backwards a little bit and create environments in our classrooms where we're posing difficult questions to groups of students and making them solve the problems in the class in front of us. We'd have some of our faculty say, well, I do group work, but usually what happens in group work is one of the students does the bulk of the work and the rest of it. We said, well, let's stop talking about group work. Let's go back to our common language and talk about collaboration and problem solving. And then let's have those collaborative activities take place inside the classroom so that you can make sure that every student is doing their part, so that you can assign roles to each person on the team and ensure that each student is doing their part. So they're learning how to collaborate and work together, knowing that if they don't collaborate and work together, they're not going to have a final product. And what we've learned is that this is a Trent Mohrbutter term. This is most, right? That most students do mostly what you want most of the time. If you create that environment, what we have found is that most students are happily engaged with one another and trying to work to solve problems. And then we talk about organization. Well, that's time management. We teach the students, we organize our own lessons. We've transitioned from lecture notes and teaching out of a textbook to actually building lesson plans so that in a classroom, the student sees that we're going to spend 10 minutes doing this, then we're going to spend 20 minutes doing this, we're going to spend 10 minutes doing this, and then we're going to do some formative assessment or do some sort of assessment at the end of the class. The students, we model that kind of organization, and the students respond to that. So they're learning. We've become much more intentional at the foundational skills by integrating the engaging strategies in the classroom. And then reading strategies, like I mentioned earlier, that's a foundation skill that you know, we kind of expect for students to be able to at least read at a basic level. What we have found is that if we teach students how to read with purpose, so don't let them leave the class to do some reading, have them do the reading right there in front of you, chunk the material into, so instead of them reading chapter 2 and coming back to class and reporting, let's divide chapter 2 into 10 or 12 pieces and have every student be responsible for reading a little bit of it and reporting it out. We teach students then how to read technically and read for purpose, how to understand the main points, and how to have conversations about those main points before they report those things out. So what we've seen with our AVID for higher education, high engagement instructional strategies is that the strategies, by teaching in a different way, we've actually been able to integrate intentionally the foundation skills into all of our classes. And because we haven't just focused on one area, like we still do our general education student learning outcomes team, we still have our gen ed classes, but these foundational skills aren't isolated to just those classes anymore. They're broadly spaced across the campus, or again, where students are seamlessly moving from class to class, from subject area to subject area. And I'll use nursing as another great example of this. Most of our nurses that end up in our nursing program start enrolled in the college getting their general education taken care of. So if they're taking an anatomy and physiology class and a math class and an English class, and then they transition to the nursing program, and the nursing instructors are using the exact same language, the exact same pedagogy that the students learned in their gen ed classes, well, that all reinforces. It reinforces their learning, but it also reinforces those foundational skills throughout their experience on the college. And not for nothing, our nursing retention rate, I didn't include this slide, but this is really exciting. Our nursing retention rate over the last 6 or 7 years has gone from about 45 to 50% to over 70%. And our NCLEX first-time pass rate is over 80% this year. So, you know, our nursing faculty are excited about that, but all of the faculty that teach students who want to become nurses along the way, they get excited about that. So we all get to share in that celebration. And that, again, when we go back to slide 1, what is success? Wow, that's success. When students who want to be nurses graduate from our nursing program, whether it's 3 years later or 6 years later, that's an easy chalk mark for success on our campus. And this is just a kind of a pre-AVID for higher education, professional development, and post, right? So name tents. What do we do with name tents? Well, that's the strategy we use from day one until everybody in the class knows everybody else's name and a little bit about them. So we don't get hyper-personal, but as students know one another more closely, they build relationships in the classroom. The faculty build relationships with the students, and what happens is it helps us create a cooperative interdependence in the classroom. And so when we ask students to collaborate, they're much more willing and able to do so. It's not just the person sitting beside them. 10-2-2 I mentioned earlier, that's 10 minutes of direct instruction, 2 minutes of thinking about a problem, and then 2 minutes of sharing and reporting out. So one of our faculty a number of years ago talked about her aha moment where she did some formative assessment. She did some teaching. She gave the students an opportunity to reflect and report out. And when the students couldn't answer the question that she knew she had covered, she said, "Wait a second, I'm glad I didn't go to go through the entire class period before I found out I needed to reteach that." So 10-2-2 is one of those opportunities that allows us to teach do some direct instruction, some collaboration and some thinking and reporting out, and we tie some formative assessment into that as well. Think, pair, share, again, pose a question, some critical thinking takes place, some collaboration and communication takes place, and then report out. Quick write, I mentioned that already, gives an opportunity for students to write their thoughts and report out on their thoughts and to share their thoughts with their classmates. Academic reading, this is one of those things where when we talk about students struggling with math and reading, and in a country where everyone expects that folks know how to read, we read at different levels. And so there's a stigma attached to folks that, students that read well and students that don't read so well. And so the academic reading strategies allow students to circle, underline, bold, mark the text. We teach them very specific strategies, and then those things become reinforced. So as they're reading a short piece of text, they start to learn how to pull out the really important pieces of that. And what we've heard from our industry partners is that we need folks who are able to, let's say, computer integrated machining. A student goes out and they're writing code for a machining tool, and a new handbook comes out with a safety procedure. They need for that person to be able to read the safety procedure and pull out the critical points that they need to implement that at that time. Academic reading is one of those things that allows students to figure out what's important in the text. And some people say, well, everything's important, but we all know that that's I'm not going to say it's not true, but certainly some things are more important than others in the text. And academic reading strategies allow students to figure out how to navigate the text and get the real important stuff out. Jigsaw is a collaborative tool. Again, instead of assigning an entire chapter for students to read on their own, we chunk the chapter into pieces, have them learn it in the class, become experts on their section, and teach it to their peers. We get them to do a report out and to make sure that they're on task. We circulate around the room and make sure that everybody's on task with that. And then exit tickets, probably one of the easiest formative assessment tools and one of the most broadly used things on our campus, is that at the end of the lesson, you can ask a simple 3-2-1 exit ticket. What are the 3 main points that you learned? What are the 2 things you found most interesting? And what is one other question that you have? Students can drop those off on their way out of the room, and as an instructor instantaneously if you need to go back and reteach something or if you're good to move on the next day. And you can see on the slide over the course of our 4-year implementation from 2013 to from 2012-13 to 2016-17, the significant increase in strategy use. And I mentioned earlier, what does that mean for transfer students? You can see the data is up to 2015, so this will be our first couple of cohorts of students who graduated out and transferred to 4-year system. It's a significant jump. I mean, do we like to know that our students who transfer from Nash Community College and go to take 3rd and 4th level English classes when they transfer to a 4-year institution are performing at, are increasing their GPA 0.2, 0.2.5, or sorry, 0.25. We think that's significant, and our students report back that they're having more success when they transfer. What it's meant for the college holistically in terms of graduation, when we started paying more attention to the students as individuals and holistically, we started helping them realize their certificates and diploma awards as well. So we helped them when they started achieving their certificates. we started doing that work for them. And that represented a significant jump in terms of all graduates. That certificates include certificates, diplomas, and associate degrees. But what you can see as well is we've pulled our associate degree graduates out of there as well. And over that time period, the 2013, that's about a 34% increase in associate degree graduates as well. So again, something for the whole campus to be incredibly proud of rather. And then, you know, as we kind of wrap things up, we every year, every program, like most institutions of higher ed, we have our advisory groups. And one of the things we ask all of our program directors or coordinators to ask their advisory groups is, when our students graduate and come to work for them, do they recognize some of these qualities? And we don't put it out for them to say, are they good at soft skills? We just ask them open-ended questions and let them report back. And I've just included a couple of quotes. And now again, this is me being selective, and I'm in full transparency. Not all of our graduates, despite what the first bullet says, employers' response is 100% positive with graduate workplace preparedness. We get excited about that. We know that's not across the board, but it's great to hear that in one of our programs that the employers on that advisory group report that all of the folks, that all of the students that they hire come to them ready to enter the workplace. As you can see, Nash Community College graduates make good employees. They're professional, engaged, and inquisitive. That was a great word for me to read in an advisory minutes just recently, actually, that students are inquisitive, right? If there's nothing to do, our students get up and ask, what can I do next? Or will take initiative to take on that next project. And again, students are well educated and professional. And those are the types of things, obviously, that we hope to see, or we plan to see. We don't try to take hope out of it, right? I mean, we plan to hear and see about our students when they graduate from Nash Community College. In most cases, when I start talking about teaching and learning, I can go on for an incredibly lengthy period of time, but we're just over 40 minutes, I see, from the start. So I'm going to wrap it up there and give us an opportunity to, if we do have any questions out there, that we can maybe bounce around a little bit. And it's been my pleasure chatting with y'all. Thank you very much.
Trent, thank you so much. That was excellent, and really just fun to hear the story and the progress that you've made, and very inspiring work. And I hope that it's benefited everybody that's been listening today. And we do have some questions, so I will get to those now, and hopefully we can keep the conversation going. If there's other questions that people have, you can start to type them in now so that we get a good list here. I guess the one that I have before we jump into some of them on the list is just your enthusiasm is clearly infectious, and I'm sure that it took more than a small group of you to get the president excited about this direction. But what kind of sort of thesis did you have to present to really kind of get everybody on campus moving in this direction? I mean, given all of the different strategic priorities that you guys could focus on, you seem like you really got this one at the top. And how did you really get that to happen in terms of the president's mind share?
Yeah, so great question, thanks. So a couple of different things. One, he had some familiarity with AVID and the professional development with our early college on campus. For the folks who are familiar with the early college, students had moved from being moderately successful as they started taking college classes to being very successful. That intrigued him. The other part of it was we let faculty get involved right from the beginning. And so I really posed the question about AVID for higher education, but let a group of faculty go to the first summer institute and make sense of it for themselves, and come back and help me make the recommendation at that point that this was going to be a worthwhile adventure or worthwhile investment in our campus. Those folks obviously became that kind of first group of early adopters. And what really helped the transition, of course, was then letting them, it became less of me and my enthusiasm and more about them and their enthusiasm. As they dove deeper into the AVID strategies, as they were engaging their students and getting that feedback, folks, people who are in the teaching and learning business because they're passionate about students and passionate about students being successful can't help but get fired up when they see a distinct difference in their students, in their retention, in their success. And so we kind of worked to let the faculty really take a hold of that, where we had a couple of faculty leaders begin to facilitate more and more professional development. And as teams of faculty became more confident, departments of faculty became more confident about their teaching, they owned that and were a big part of moving the rock uphill.
Makes tons of sense. And in terms of that, I mean, did you feel that the faculty felt like there was a real commitment to investing in them, and that this felt like a real support rather than sort of a critical kind of evaluation of their teaching skills, but really there was a genuine interest in improving and helping them? I mean, do you have the sense that was the impression among faculty?
Yeah, we really worked hard, maybe almost to a fault, to not mandate professional development. We did, without using the word mandate, we encouraged, but we went kind of back to that same reason why students come to class, is because they're engaged and they believe that it has value. We knew that if we were implementing professional development that engaged faculty, and the faculty would walk away going, wait a second, that was really valuable, they'd tell two friends and they'd tell two friends, and really we've been able to move the entire campus. There are always, of course, going to be a few outliers, and they have remained, but holistically, the bell curve of adoption has skewed mostly to the implementation side of things.
Gotcha. Another question that came in was how can you apply some of these instructional strategy best practices to online courses, especially those that are asynchronous? What have you been able to do that?
Great question. In fact, again, another presidential priority was to develop an online department with an online department chair and subject matter experts on the campus, so that the online piece of it was not left out of the equation. And so our online department chair and the subject matter experts have actually built a crosswalk of face-to-face strategies and online strategies. So name tents become Padlets, think, pair, share becomes VoiceThread and Edpuzzle. So they've worked hard to make sure that those strategies are, the technology has evolved so quickly in the online environment that a lot of these tools are out there. It's just about helping faculty get skilled up on them. And Avid for Higher Education has built, in fact, one of our online faculty chair, he actually helped write their online faculty manual. So it's been a critical component to help make sure that online is experiencing the same, or in some cases more success than face-to-face.
And another question here: how did, in terms of the employability skills, was that something that was driving this at the beginning? I mean, was it very clear even 6 or 7 years ago that these broader foundational skills were really important to the employers, or was that something that sort of emerged as you've been getting better at it yourself?
Yeah, a little bit of both. I mean, we kind of knew something was missing, and we heard. I just don't think we were listening really closely to our employers. We were focused on our content. So, you know, we trusted that our industry partners would then skill up their folks, you know, however they wanted at that point. But as those conversations evolved, and as we said, okay, wait a second, if we can do this in the classroom, that's just going to increase the preparedness. And it went back to, you know, how do we define success for our students? If a student comes and takes a one semester certificate program with us and then goes into the workplace, that's not a lot of time. So we need to use that time valuably while they're with us to give them as many skills as they can in order to be successful in the workplace. So it was sort of a horse and cart type of thing, but sometimes the horse was in front of the cart and sometimes it was behind the cart. And really over the course of the first 2 or 3 years, we really landed on the fact that the foundational skills were critical, and we could help our students, again, whether they were transferring or going into a career opportunity. We were only going to help them be better prepared for either of those situations by, you know, whatever the employability skills, the soft skills, those skills that we now, you know, we're referring to as foundational, helping students be able to work together, to read and write and communicate, to think critically, to ask the right questions. We started looking at it as, you know, what is our role, right? It's not just to teach the content, it's about the process, it's about all of the skills that we want to be able to point to and say our students have those things, and that's part of what we define as success.
That's great. I was speaking with an employer this morning about some of their challenges with new hires, recent graduates, and they were speaking to all of these challenges. We're actually working with them on some coaching that we might be able to help with for the early recent grads. And one of the questions or comments that we have in here is that that students are lacking or who lack writing skills, or I think we could even broaden that more. Often want, some sort of template to complete the assignments, or they really don't want to be stuck to think through things themselves. And that really mirrors what a lot of these employers talk about in terms of, feeling like students, if they're not given the syllabus, if they're not given exact clarity on how to go through and do the work, they can't reason that out themselves. And, right. one of the things that one of the habits we've heard a lot of employers talk about is cultivating curiosity in the face of ambiguity. And so that's Absolutely. One of our big things. And you're not going to get that when students are just used to being lectured at and then, tested a few times a semester. So, how do you deal with that, to this comment that was put into the chat here, just about, getting people over that, that desire to sort of have it all framed out for them and putting them into sort of more of the unknown? How do you get students more comfortable with that?
Right. So one of the things, we had a couple of instructors kind of experiment with turning that learning and that teaching over to students, where they were allowing students to make up quiz questions and then actually facilitating a quiz, for example. Well, what the instructor found out very quickly is that if you provide the framework for the students, they'll generate questions. And a lot of times the students will ask questions that are higher level, more difficult. They want to challenge each other. And so one of the things that we've done, and again, this is growing. This isn't one of the things that I would say you'd see across our campus, but certainly in pockets across our campus is where we turn that teaching and learning over to the students, so that we give them a little latitude, so that they learn how to ask questions of each other. They learn how to ask questions of the instructor, to the point, like I said, where they're actually designing quizzes and some of the formative assessment pieces. So when they're driving that, they become less dependent on a handout, fill in the blanks, multiple choice, right? So we've created that. We're working on creating that environment so that students they know that they're going to have to stand and deliver either on the questioning side or the answering side, and that helps empower them and build their confidence.
Yeah, that's fantastic. I mean, that mirrors so much what we see in the corporate world, the exact problem that needing to sort of have a syllabus or something framed for them, which just more and more, given the fast pace of the working world, just doesn't exist. And if people aren't able to kind of come in and figure things out and sort of adapt, they're going to be at a disadvantage. And it doesn't matter whether, as you were talking about before this call, whether that's a welder or any other profession, it's expected everywhere. So I love to hear that you're doing that.
Yeah.
So with that, I think we've run through our questions, and I guess I would wrap it up at this point. And thank you very much for your time, and encourage you to keep up the great work, and hopefully you'll continue to make sustained progress in the direction you're headed.
Thanks very much. It's been my pleasure. You'll have a great day.
Okay, and don't forget to take a look at the sign up for the next webinar that we have up here on the on the screen right now. Thank you.